Kia ora, welcome to Central News for Tuesday, the 21st of January. I'm Hilary Entwistle. The Bay of Plenty Regional Council's water quality monitoring has given the all clear to the waterways of toxic algae blooms. All swimming areas in the Bay of Plenty are of green level, which means highly likely to be uncontaminated, suitable for bathing but requiring water managers to continue surveillance or routine monitoring. Science manager Rob Donald says algae bloom can be detrimental to human and animal health if it reaches toxic level, but little is known as to what can lead to harmful levels.
So generally toxic algal blooms would be quite noticeable in the waterways. So you'd see a green slime or a scum in the lake or the river, and it's those higher quantities of the algae, particularly when they die off and collapse, that tends to be the time they release the toxins. In most cases, if there's a toxin issue, you will know there's algae in the water, you'll see it, you'll smell it, and you'll probably feel it. And so, again, in those situations, people should avoid bathing or contacting, and even avoid letting their pets near that sort of situation. There have been cases where dogs have died from eating algal scums from rivers, so it's not a very nice environment for people to be in.
The new Pilot Bay Boardwalk will be the scene of regular community picnics once the paint dries on the piano. Taurunga's art community project of painting pianos for the streets has set aside one of the instruments for the boardwalk to be played at the banquets. The banquets are part of the Rise Up New Zealand initiative, which originated after the 2011 Christchurch earthquakes, to encourage a greater sense of community in New Zealand towns. Sian Northfield has been involved with the piano project and describes the Pilot Bay piano.
Well, this beautiful piano here has had many artists involved, chiefly Wendy Peterson and Kate Steed, and of course the gorgeous Constanza Nightingale, beautiful name for an artist. And this piano has been sponsored by the Mount Maunganui Backpackers, and it is to be placed at Pilot Bay for the Twilight Symphony banquets that are happening to commemorate the opening of the boulevard, the new boardwalk there. So yeah, this piano will be down there. There'll be the seagulls have been immortalised, sharing the fish and chips, and there's a few different sort of motifs of Mount Maunganui, the surfers, and on the back there's a sup border, and it's got those lovely kind of typical Mount Maunganui landscape. This landscape part was painted by Kate Steed, and these putakawas chiefly by Wendy Peterson and Constanza here. So yeah, it's been a labour of love, and many lovely sunsets themselves have been sat painting the sunset piano.
Hundreds of Western Bay of Plenty youth are turning to community events, encouraging them to ditch alcohol and spend the summer without substances. The 100% Summer Without Substances program in Welcome Bay, Maryvale, Brookfield, Mount Maunganui, Katikati and Te Puke are being run with the tagline, "Why waste your summer wasted when you can enjoy a fantastic summer?" About 200 to 300 participants took part in the Mount event during the first week of January, while close to 100 Te Puke youngsters enjoyed last Thursday's event, and other areas are recording about 100 young people getting involved. It's now crunch time for those wanting to enrol for either of two separate Western Bay Plenty District Council by-elections, set for the same day next month. By-elections for the Council's Makatu Te Puke Ward seat and the 4th Waihi Beach Community Board seat are on February 11, with new enrolments open to polling day. Registrar of Electors for Bay Plenty, Leslie Christophers, says people who haven't enrolled in time to get their voting papers in the mail can still enrol and then cast a special vote. Now for our region's weather, Hamilton, you may have a few fine spells, but it will be mostly showers with a westerly. Your expected high is 24 and an overnight low of 13. Tauranga, you are looking similar, mostly showers, but there may be some fine spells in there. Your expected high is 25 and an overnight low of 15. Just ahead, the first marathon in Tauranga in decades. Welcome to Central News on TV Central. Tauranga has many sporting events and it's quite famous for its triathlons, duathlons and Ironmans. But interestingly enough, it has been years since there has been a marathon held in Tauranga. Beyond Adventure Racing is holding a marathon with a difference at the Tecked All-Terrain Park.
So can you walk us through the course?
So the course is made up of a mixture of equestrian tracks, a couple of four-wheel drive tracks and mountain bike tracks, and then obviously some hiking tracks. It's a pretty good course, it's pretty diverse. There's some gravel roads just to kind of tick some Ks under, but most of it's literally proper trail running. So you're surrounded by bush, getting into the depths of the all-terrain park and seeing how it looks from the other side, really.
On the website you've said that the course keeps the mind entertained. What did you mean by that?
Well, a lot of people kind of go on the normal road runs and they get really bored because you're just trudging along a pavement, following a line or following a path. So when you're trail running, you're constantly turning, you know, you can often be chasing someone down and they're constantly round the next bend and everything changes every step of the way. So it really keeps you entertained from the point of view, the K's just a while away. Like I often go out running out there on my own just to clear the head and it's just a beautiful place to be and kind of distracts you. So a few highlights of the course are you cross, I think it's 2 different rivers, couple of streams. There's lots of bits where you're kind of crawling along and scrambling around, but yeah, it's a great course. It's really entertaining.
So literally we'll be on our hands and knees at some point?
I wouldn't say hands and knees, but you're kind of scrambling up a couple of hills. It wouldn't be a trail run if you weren't scrabbling here or there.
Does off-road running require a different skill set?
It's definitely a different skill set. I think in some ways it's a lot more mentally taxing because you've constantly got to watch where you place your feet, but at the same time that's kind of the part that keeps it entertaining and keeps you on your toes. It's those kind of things that really get people off the road and onto the trails. It's that kind of interesting, different, a bit more technical and a bit more challenging.
Are there different muscle groups that you're kind of using? Are you using more of your ankle? And
if anything, it's the opposite. Like I said before, actually when you're running off-road, you often use a lot more of your forefoot, so you're running up on your toes a bit more. So when you run up on your toes, you actually add like an extra suspension joint in from your ankle. So you get your ankle, your knee and your hip working. So what you find is a lot of people who can't run on road can run really well on the trails and off-road. And then also you've got the added fact that, you know, you're running on mud, you're running on grass, you're running in the trails, so it's all generally a lot softer anyway. So for example, I can't really run on roads anymore because I've got quite bad knees, but trail running is absolutely fine for me and I can still go and chew the K's up. So yeah, it's a really good alternative that people often just write off, so definitely give it a go if you've got some sore knees or sore ankles.
visit beyondadventureracing.co.nz to register. It's not too late. Now for something else to do in Tauranga this weekend, the Classic Flyers Airshow is on this Sunday. This year they are commemorating 100 years since World War I began, and there will be planes that were used in the First World War, and yes, that means they are 100 years old and still fly.
Hi Hilary, the one behind us is a Fokker triplane from 1915, 1916, about 100 years ago now, from Masterton, the Vintage Aviator Limited, a group of aircraft enthusiasts that build these wonderful old machines, or rebuild these wonderful old machines in Masterton.
How fast can these machines go?
Full noise for both of them is 100 miles per hour, which is about 80 knots, or 160 kilometres an hour in modern terms. That's downhill at speed.
What were they used for in World War I?
These were both World War I fighter planes, and the counterparts were the English fighter planes. The pilots were basically attacking each other above the battlefronts and shooting each other down.
And the ones that you have here are the German planes?
This is a German one, yes, and the Fokker D7 with it is another German one.
Can you tell us a little bit about the engineer himself?
Well, Mr. Fokker was the guy that designed these. He's actually a Dutchman, and he was obviously a very clever man. He designed many, many things throughout the years from there on, and these are two of his earlier achievements, and very successful they were.
Why has Classic Flyers brought these planes up so early?
These two aircraft are the advance party of Germans for a display setting of 4 aircraft we're getting up from the Vintage Aviator in Masterton, and the 2 English aircraft are arriving closer to the date. But we're very happy to have these here for people to look at and to whet their appetite.
Have you been for a ride in one yet?
Not in these, no I haven't. I'd like to though, one day perhaps.
The air show is on this Sunday from 10 a.m. till 6 p.m. and Central News will be there. Coming up next, PSP warnings still for our coastlines. Welcome back. In October 2012, there was a warning for paralytic shellfish poisoning on our coastlines, and unfortunately, over a year later, that warning still stands. Tonight, we look back at the interview with Toite Ora Public Health to remind us how severe PSP can be.
It's a potentially serious illness which can affect people if they eat shellfish that are contaminated with toxins.
So what are the symptoms?
Well, it can range from mild symptoms of numbness and tingling around the mouth and lips to mild numbness of the fingers and toes, right through to really severe symptoms where people basically stop breathing. There have been illnesses that have gone so severe overseas that people have died. A number of our cases just prior to Christmas were admitted to hospital and required intensive care for a night or two. So it can be really quite severe.
What is actually happening to the body when it is poisoned by these shellfish?
Well, the toxins that are in the shellfish, which are actually produced by algae that they've eaten, basically attack the body, and in this case particularly the respiratory system and the nervous system. So things just don't work as well. So you feel these funny sensations because the nerves aren't working, and you're not breathing so well because it affects your breathing as well.
And what causes the shellfish to become toxic?
There's algae in the water at all times. When the algae blooms to high levels, they end up affecting the shellfish. The issue with shellfish in particular are they're what we call filter feeders, and so they get all their food by filtering, in most cases, many litres of water per day. And so anything that's in the water, including their food, gets concentrated. But if it's algae with toxins, they end up concentrating the toxins. And it doesn't actually affect the health of an individual shellfish, but of course we come along and eat many shellfish, so we end up concentrating what's in them as well. We had one of our cases admitted to hospital, had eaten 100 small shellfish. So he might not have got too sick if he'd just eaten one or two, but that number, he ended up getting quite a significant dose of toxin.
Will cooking the shellfish actually help?
No, unfortunately it doesn't. The toxins are basically a protein which are not harmed by the cooking. So very differently to when shellfish are contaminated through farm runoff or pollution of the water and they're full of bacterial viruses, cooking them adequately will usually make them safe. But with this toxin, no, it doesn't make any difference.
Are there certain shellfish that are more likely to be contaminated with PSP?
Well, yes, but unfortunately all the bivalve shellfish, which includes the tuatuas, the pippies, the mussels, the scallops, they're all affected. The only thing that people might see as being a shellfish which is not affected are oysters, and crabs and crayfish are not affected, but they're not bivalve shellfish.
What does neurotoxin actually mean?
It means toxic to the nervous system. Another toxin is called amnesic shellfish toxin, which literally affects your brain and you start losing your memory. But this one's called paralytic shellfish poison, and yeah, it affects the nervous system.
You have had an increase in cases in the Bay of Plenty, as you mentioned. How many cases and what happened to these patients?
Since the first weekend in December, we've had 29 cases reported to us. By far the majority, over 20 of them, ended up in hospital, and as I said, a small number were in intensive care for a night or two. The warning's been in place since August, so we've known that there have been high levels of toxins in the environment and in the shellfish since August, but for some reason people didn't start getting sick until December. Now, it's important to emphasise that it's a warning, it's not a ban. We don't stop people eating shellfish. Our job is to let them know that there's an increased risk. We know that people receive that information and some of them choose to continue collecting shellfish. I guess that's okay so long as they know that they're taking a significant risk.
Do you think that these recent cases will act as a wake-up call to the community?
Well, we hope so. Since just prior to Christmas, so now 3 weeks, I guess, we've only had 2 more cases since prior to Christmas. So 27 of them were in the 3 weeks leading up to Christmas. So hopefully the message is getting there, because we know from our ongoing surveillance that the problem's still there.
Have we had paralytic shellfish poisoning in the Bay of Plenty before?
Unfortunately, we have. And around the New Zealand coastline, surveillance for these toxins have been in place now for about 20 years. and it comes and goes. It's more common in summer months and in the warmer water, but there have been blooms off the Fiordland coast in winter.
And how long is it expected to last?
It's impossible to say. What we do know is that a previous bloom 2 or 3 years ago in the Bay of Plenty, affecting pretty much the same area, lasted for 18 months. We continue with the Ministry for Primary Industries to conduct surveillance on a weekly basis, so we know what's going on in the water and in the shellfish. As soon as things have gone away, we'll be quick to let the public know.
What actually causes those algae blooms?
Probably the answer is a number of things. Like I said, temperature is one of them, the nutrient levels in the water is another. But in the end, some of these things just happen naturally and are unpredictable.
That was PSP, and coming up next we talk PCP contamination. If you have just joined us, welcome to Central News. From the 1950s to the late 1980s, the Kopiopio Canal in Whakatane was contaminated by the toxic chemical pentachlorophenol, otherwise known as PCP. I spoke with the Regional Council to find out about the efforts to clean up the waterway and just how so much PCP ended up there.
PCP was used in the sawmill, where the current location of the hub is, between the 1950s and about 1989. There was stormwater runoff, which then got into the canal, and it's actually a dioxin that is attached to the sediment in the canal. That's the contaminant that we're worried about.
What is the risk of ingesting a dioxin? Why is there such a need to clean up the canal?
Basically, if anyone eats eels or eats from the canal, and the eels have been in the sediment, then the risk is an accumulation of dioxin. So it's through gradual accumulation beyond levels that are healthy. Also, if you repeatedly swim or have contact with dioxin-contaminated sediment, that can also affect your health. So it's really accumulation of it.
Has the groundwater been affected?
No, it hasn't, because it really bonds or binds very tightly to the sediment, so the water itself doesn't contain the dioxin. There may be very small clay particles that have dioxin in it, but not the water itself.
What are the health risks?
Well, after the dioxin was found to be in the canal, the Ministry of Health actually issued a warning against recreating in the canal or eating eels from the canal. That warning has been in place since 2005. So the risk to the community is of this unexposed pathways of dioxin contamination. If there was to be a huge flood, that sediment could come out and actually contaminate adjacent lands. And there's no control of anyone going into the canal. A child, a dog, an animal can go into there and be exposed to the dioxin as it stands at the moment. And that's the main reason for the project, is we want to remove those unexposed pathways and make the canal safe to the community.
And then what is the risk to humans then?
The health risk to a human is that gradual accumulation of dioxin in the body. It doesn't flush out, it just accumulates in fats, particularly in eels, but also if humans were to ingest it, consume it, it would affect their health.
Later on in the week, we continue talking with Ken about the project to remove the PCP from the canal. Changes to the alcohol law came in effect on December last year. Most of those changes involve the supply of alcohol to minors. So what do you need to know as a parent? So what are the changes under the new law around the supply of alcohol to a minor?
One thing that hasn't changed is that a parent or legal guardian can still supply their child who is under 18. What has changed is that someone who is not a child's parent or legal guardian can supply to someone a child of that age, as long as they have the express permission from the parent. So for example, if I have a 17-year-old son who has a 17-year-old friend, I can supply his friend with alcohol as long as I have the permission from that child's parent.
How will the police attempt to enforce this?
For us, it's not so much a matter of enforcement, it's more education. So if we can have that information out to the public that they need to take those steps if they are going to be supplying to someone who is not their child. That's more important to us than going and knocking on people's doors and checking on them in their own home that they are doing it properly. Part of that education is letting people know that if they are going to be supplying a minor who's not their child, that they have to do it responsibly. So you're not going to be giving, lining up tequila shots for a 17-year-old in an environment that's not conducive to being responsible.
What is responsibly supplying?
Well, it's like you would for anyone. It's time, place and circumstance. The type of alcohol that's being supplied, the amount of alcohol that's being supplied, the supervision, so not just giving a child a six-pack of RTDs or a bottle of wine and saying, go and help yourself. So there's got to be some supervision around the consumption as well if you're going to supply to someone who's under 18.
What are the consequences?
Well, yeah, there's the monetary consequence or the criminal consequence, if you like, a $2,000 fine if you supply to a minor without the permission from their parent. But probably more important than that is the social consequence if something goes wrong. And I mean, we've seen it before in the past where young people have consumed alcohol, they've got into a car, they've ended up having a car accident, and unfortunately someone's been killed. So that's probably the bigger consequence more than a monetary fine from our point of view.
That is Central News for tonight. Email us at news@tvcentral.co.nz or like us on Facebook and let us know if you have your own stories. Join me again tomorrow night for more stories from around our regions. I'm Hilary Entwistle. Have a lovely evening.
This has been an Alpha Media production, a division of Television Media Group.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.